We sit here in the aftermath of a recent war in a dramatically altered moment for India and Pakistan. I'm here with Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, former Foreign Minister of Pakistan, son of Pakistan's late Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. Thank you so much indeed, Mr. Bhutto, for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you for having me.
India has drawn a new red line that every act of terror it believes has come from Pakistan will be treated as an act of war. You say Pakistan's hands are clean and India is the bully. But is it so unreasonable, Mr. Bhutto, to assume that there was a Pakistan link behind this recent attack, given that it's a matter of international record for decades that the Pakistani state has backed extremist groups?
Thank you once again for having me. The new normal or the new abnormal that India would like to impose in the subcontinent outside of international law, the Geneva Conventions, the UN Charter, is that any terrorist attack within India means war with Pakistan. I certainly believe that this does not serve the interests of Pakistan and it doesn't serve the interests of India. Two nuclear-armed countries have gotten to the point where we've reduced the threshold for full-on war, military conflict between our two countries to this level, which in effect means that we leave the destiny of 1.7 billion people not in the hands of the Indian government or the Pakistani government, but in the hands of nameless, faceless, non-state actors. As far as Pakistan's past is concerned, it's not Pakistan's past alone. This is our collective past.
You seem to suggest that this almost goes back to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which is decades ago. But as recently, Mr. Bhutto, as 2022, a US State Department report says that several UN and US designated terrorist groups continue to operate from Pakistani soil, including the Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, which, for the benefit of our audience, are groups linked to multiple attacks in India. This is in the past, Mr. Bhutto. This is right now.
2022, I'd like to emphasize, is the past. We're in 2025.
We're 3 years away from 2022. Sure. That's not the past, surely.
Excuse me. If we are going to have this interview, I request that you at liberty to ask your questions, but please give me the space to respond. As far as the past is concerned, I don't believe we should burden whether it's the children of India or the children of Pakistan with the actions of the past. I certainly believe we shouldn't punish them for the past. As far as a statement by the State Department in 2022, I could contest that with you, but suffice to say it's beyond that now. What we've gone through is an FATF process that is far more rigorous than any statement coming out of whether it's the British Foreign Office or the American Foreign Office or any foreign office for that matter. And the FATF process has endorsed Pakistan's action against those terrorist groups which are of concern to India. In addition to that, there's been no terrorist attack in India conducted by these terrorist groups, whether it's in 2019 or now. Both these incidences were indigenous attacks if it was something else.
Of course, Mr. Bhutto, India would contest that. But I just want to come back to, now if I may, because you have been given a chance to answer.
I haven't been able to make this point that if it was the case that a specific terrorist group, a cross-border terrorist group, cross-border individuals were involved in this attack, today you would know their name, I would know their name. You would see their faces, I would see their faces.
Okay, but to come back to my question.
That the Indian government is not sharing with their own people, with the international community, or with us, the identity of these individuals because they're indigenous to Kashmir.
In 2019, actually, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, one of the groups that I mentioned, actually claimed credit for it. But I still haven't got a clear answer to my question. If I may ask the question. As to these groups, because you cited the FATF, which is a anti-terror financing watchdog body, which you've come off that list. But you still haven't answered my specific question about the fact that the US State Department is saying these groups are still active. And if I may ask you, so what action has Pakistan taken specifically against men like Hafiz Saeed and Masood Azhar, who are the leaders of these groups? Because the New York Times, in a May 2025 report, as recent as that, Mr. Bhutto said, Hafiz Saeed is a free man despite brief periods of detention.
That's not accurate. As far as the action Pakistan has taken, the reason I refer to the FATF is because it documents that actions. It documents the more than 90 organizations, buildings, institutions, fronts that the Pakistani government has taken back from these groups. It identifies the cases that we filed, whether it's money laundering, terror financing or others against individuals of concern, and achieve convictions. As far as specifically Hafiz Saeed and Masood Azhar. That's factually not correct that Hafiz Saeed is a free man. He is in the custody of the Pakistani state. As far as Masood Azhar is concerned, we have been unable to arrest him or identify him. Given his past within the Afghan jihad context, it is our belief that he is in Afghanistan. If and when the Indian government shares information with us that he is in Pakistani soil, we would be more than happy to arrest him. The fact is the Indian government is not.
Okay, but Mr. Bhutto, one second.
Nor were any of these individuals involved in the terrorist attack that justified this war.
Okay,
you went to war on a lie. This is a precedent that has been set and India is trying to exploit. That you cry terrorist and attack a sovereign Muslim country.
I just want to come back on what you said about Masood Azhar, because that's quite an extraordinary statement you're making, that you're saying that a UN designated terrorist, you're not aware of his whereabouts, and you expect India to provide you that information.
Excuse me, when you have a CT cooperation with any country, we provide groups of our concern, they provide groups of their concern. That's how we managed to thwart attacks here in London, thwart attacks in New York, thwart attacks in Pakistan. As far as Masood Azhar is concerned, if he is in Afghanistan, that the West is now handed over to a group that once upon a time they called terrorists and now they call the people in charge of Afghanistan. It's not possible for Pakistan to go and do what all of NATO was unable to do within Afghanistan. There's no reason for Pakistan to want to see this individual or any individual of concern to be active. India has also suffered terrorism, but Pakistan suffers terrorism on a daily basis. We, if I may say so, experience more terrorist attacks than India do.
I mean, you have personal experience.
Exactly, which is why I seek your assistance in not furthering this Indian toolkit that they use, whether it's internally, to demonize the Muslims in India by using the word terrorism as a wolf whistle. To demonize all the people in Pakistan.
So, Mr. Bhutto, as you know, I have not been citing the Indian toolkit. I've been citing the US State Department. I've been citing UN reports. But if I may continue,
you know the geopolitical connotations of the US position and the Indians' position. It makes it all the more significant that despite those geopolitical compulsions during this conflict, the United States, the Secretary of State, their State Department, or anywhere else did not endorse the Indian position that this attack was carried out by cross-border terrorists. There's a reason for that. I promise you, if that was the case, and the intelligence agencies in the United States or elsewhere had collaborated India's view and not Pakistan, there'd be a very different situation.
They also didn't condemn the Indian airstrikes as well. But if I can,
condemning the airstrikes got to do with
but if I can now ask you about it, about the point that you said. You said 2022 is the past, but Pakistan's Army Chief General Asim Munir, 6 days before the Pahalgam attack, said Kashmir is our jugular vein. He says, and I quote, "We will not leave our Kashmiri brethren in their historic struggle, their heroic struggle against Indian occupation." That sounds like a fairly direct provocation 6 days before an attack.
Are you contesting the United Nations Security Council resolutions on Kashmir?
I'm asking about General Munir
and his statement. How does his statement contradict with Pakistan's historic position since the time of Muhammad Ali Jinnah that Kashmir is an integral part of Pakistan? How does that statement contest the reality that the Indian government is operating as an occupying force in Indian-held Kashmir? The reason why this is of a concern to us, not just within the context of the United Nations and absolutely Kashmir being the jugular vein of Pakistan, it's also of a concern to us because I believe that the increase in suppression and oppression within the context of Kashmir post-2019 will induce the local population to react, to resist, and they will provide the cannon fodder for new terrorist organizations, for splinter groups to conduct such attacks. And considering that Pakistan is held accountable for groups that we don't control, it's all the more important for us to recognize that Kashmir is a disputed territory that needs resolution so that we can address the root cause of our conflict and the root cause of indigenous terrorism in occupied Kashmir.
Let me come to those accusations you've been making now several times about India's conduct in Kashmir in a second. I want to come back to General Munir for the following reason, because this idea that there's a struggle in Kashmir which you're backing, the people of Kashmir by and large want peace like everywhere.
So
but hold on. Let me finish the question. But it's the accusation is that Pakistan, and this is General Pervez Musharraf himself, your former army chief,
Dictator.
who said in 2015, he was also president, he was also the army chief.
Dictator.
He said, we supported and trained the Kashmiri freedom fighters. They were our heroes at that time. Later on, the religious militancy turned into terrorism.
Is that contradicting any statement that is endorsing our point of view? That collectively in the past...
How is it endorsing? It's actually proving the Indian argument that Pakistan is backing terrorists in Kashmir.
If you allow me, we're not backing terrorists in Kashmir.
General Musharraf said
we're not backing terrorists in Kashmir.
Okay.
What happened was Pakistan, as part of a Western alliance, in the 1980s, encouraged the jihadification of Pakistan in order to feed a military or a operation within Afghanistan. When that conflict ended and the international community up and left, it didn't mean that these terrorists just disappeared. At the time called freedom fighters, later turned into terrorists, disappeared. They all set up shop doing something else. Some set up Al-Qaeda in order to attack on 9/11.
Okay.
Others set up these sorts of organizations to fight what they think is a just cause through military actions within Kashmir. It took Pakistan time to recalibrate our approach. I'm not contesting the fact that historically these groups were supported in the context of Afghanistan, not in the context of Kashmir.
General Musharraf seems to be making a very different point. He's saying that you were supporting groups that became eventually terrorists very much in the present context, and you had General Munir saying we support the struggle. So it's quite possible
the struggle
to draw a
that
line.
we support, excuse me,
Yes.
I won't allow you to put words in my mouth or General Munir's mouth. The struggle that we support is the right to self-determination of the Kashmiri people under the UN Charter. That is not terrorism, even though the Indian government has convinced you and others that any Muslim within India raising the, excuse me, any Muslim within India, well, clearly they have. Any Muslim any Muslim within India raising their voice against discrimination against Muslims within India, any Kashmiri raising their voice for the rights of Kashmiris are all considered terrorists. And any potential Pakistani interviewer of an Indian delegation are all terrorists, and we don't engage in conversations with them. Pakistan deals with the reality on the ground. We are confident that we've combated these terrorists. We believe if India would like any further action to take place, then they should engage in a dialogue with Pakistan so that we can address that issue. Similarly, Pakistan has a laundry list of complaints against India about their involvement with terrorism.
We will come to that.
That is linked to this. You can't just make one accusation from one side based on history and not allow me to make my case to something that's happening here and now. The Indian government has admitted on the record as part of the Sharm el-Sheikh communique that they're behind these groups. Not some statement of a dictator. An elected Prime Minister of the Indian government, Manmohan Singh, has admitted at Sharm el-Sheikh. We've caught Kulbhushan Yadav in 2016. What was he doing in Balochistan if he wasn't supporting terrorist activity? And to this day, Pakistan has cooperated with India as far as LET. And I know you don't want to hear the truth, but it's important to. Pakistan.
It's not about the truth, it's about the time. We have limited time. You've said so much. And again, I just want to make it clear to our viewers that you can raise 100 different allegations. You're very much here on our invite, but we're going to go over time. But I will keep coming back to the question. You said a number of things there, by the way, which factually don't necessarily hold up. You talked about. Hold on, just a second. You talked about the Sharm el-Sheikh agreement. Factually, there was no admission from the Indian Prime Minister of guilt. It was a broad brush statement where the Pakistan Prime Minister raised certain concerns, and that's on the record. Okay, let's talk about dialogue now. Let's talk about dialogue, because you said that the only way forward with India is dialogue. You've actually even visited India in 2023 as Foreign Minister. But Mr. Bhutto, in the same breath, you are calling Mr. Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, a sort of Temu version of Netanyahu, like a poor copy. Temu is a sort of Chinese online shopping platform, like a Chinese Amazon. You've called him the butcher of Kashmir. You've called him the butcher of the Indus Valley civilization. Really, Mr. Bhutto? Name calling of this kind from a Pakistani leader who claims he wants peace with India. How does that work?
I don't think it is mutually exclusive to call out apartheid, to call out the violation of international law, to call out the threat to starve or cut off the water supply from a civilian population. I think you can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can call out abuses while you can advocate for peace. As far as the title of the Butcher of Gujarat, this is a title that Modi's own actions earned him. It is not a label that I gave him. I would draw your attention to your own channel's reporting on the actions of the Indian administration led by Prime Minister Modi in Gujarat. The Indian government still to this day censors any coverage, including that at the BBC, about Gujarat. My comments, which you allow me to answer,
yes.
My comments was a call for Mr. Modi to review what he'd like his legacy to be. Okay, I believe that he's in a crossroads. Yes. He can either continue on this perception that we have, sure, go on from being the Butcher of Gujarat to the Butcher of Kashmir and the Butcher of the Indus Valley Civilization, or he can be the true heir of the Indus Valley Civilization, right, push the case for peace, engage in a dialogue with Pakistan, which is the only legitimate way to address any concerns vis-a-vis terrorism, to address the root cause of Kashmir, and to address any dispute on
I was just wondering whether these sort of sweeping ad hominem smears, which can get clicks and which can get virality. But at the end of the day, he is the Prime Minister of India, and if India and Pakistan need to talk peace, one day you could be sitting across from him. And that's why I just come once again to whether the choice of language is conducive for that kind of objective.
I believe that the Indian Prime Minister has a thick enough skin that he'll be able to engage with me or anybody else across the table, just as, despite Mr. Modi's statement that the youth of Pakistan should eat bread or his bullet, I still believe that we will be able to engage in a dialogue. I don't think, as I said, these things are mutually exclusive. It's particularly important to draw the line when it comes to apartheid, cutting off food or war crimes, cutting off food or the water supply to civilian populations, violating international law.
Let me ask you about the other comparison you made, which I found interesting, that you compared Mr. Modi to Netanyahu. You made that comparison on one hand, and you've also been lavishly praising Donald Trump on the other. You call him a peacemaker. This is the same Donald Trump who has a vision of Gaza which amounts to ethnic cleansing. He posted a video of Gaza as a sort of Trump Riviera, where he and Netanyahu are sitting on an AI-generated beach while the actual Gaza burns. This is the same Donald Trump whose administration is continuing to fund and arm the carnage in Gaza. And you're praising this person.
I'm praising this person's approach to the idea of peace, particularly in my context.
So you're okay with his funding, the government's funding of the carnage in Gaza?
No, obviously I'm not. It's your government's position, not mine. It's the Indian government's position to support that situation.
I'm not, again, Mr. Bhutto, I'm not representing the Indian government.
Your words suggest otherwise. I don't know why I would get that impression.
How many times I can say that?
You've only said it once. The point is, I don't think that there's a dichotomy when clearly Mr. Trump has played a role in the context of the Indian-Pakistan escalation in achieving this ceasefire is certainly praiseworthy. Okay. I think the pertinent question to ask is why the Indian government is lying to its people, deceiving its media, and not being called out on the fact that it's trying to hide the role the US administration played in mediating this ceasefire.
Actually, the Indian position is that there was the involvement of the US as well as other countries, but ultimately the decision was taken between both sides. Can I move on from this to Kashmir, which you say is the core issue between both countries? India says it's terrorism, Pakistan says it's Kashmir. Let's focus on Pakistan. Kashmir, as you know, has remained an intractable dispute for years. In simple terms for our global audience, both sides, India and Pakistan, control one part of Kashmir. Both claim all of it. Now, of course, you can stick to your stated positions or find new ways to break the impasse. And I'm wondering, Mr. Bhutto, as a young next generation politician, do you have a solution which breaks the impasse, which is not just repeating stated positions?
I honestly don't mean to just be repeating stated positions.
Okay.
I understand that Pakistan has its position, and I believe that position is endorsed by the United Nations UN Security Council. That's the position or the solution that I will seek through a dialogue. I understand India will come at it with their own perspective. I call this a core issue for two reasons. One, it has been a fundamental...
That's not my question. My question is an out-of-the-box solution. No, I'm only asking now because I'm completely out of time.
कि मेरा जवाब क्या होना चाहिए? Yeah, as far as my position on Kashmir, with the one view, it's in line with as far as the United Nations Security Council resolutions and my belief that every conflict that India and Pakistan has had, or most of the conflicts that we've had, have been can be drawn back to this issue. The new dimension that this brings in the current context is, I believe, that the way in which India is treating Kashmir, I don't want to get partisan about it. I just want to state it as factually as I can.
Okay. When you talk about India's conduct in Kashmir, that doesn't really address my question, because you're citing the situation in Indian-administered Kashmir, but on the Pakistan side, there's hardly a clean bill of health. The UN top human rights body said in its report on Pakistan-administered Kashmir that nationalist and pro-independence figures regularly face threats, intimidation, and even arrests. The UN says it's received credible information of enforced disappearance of people from Pakistan-administered Kashmir. The amendments to Pakistan-administered Kashmir's interim constitution retained clauses that directly contravene international human rights law.
As far as our law, or whether it is in the context of Kashmir or overall in Pakistan, and its compliance with international human rights law, I would always like to see an expansive space for human rights. I've consistently advocated in my own context for more human rights, not less human rights. I agree that those would create problems, but I don't think that these organizations
This is the United Nations.
No, I'm not disputing that the report is from the United Nations. Let's go to the United Nations. Everything that is my sort of issue of concern, let's take it up with the United Nations.
But I'm saying they're accusing you of the very things that you're accusing India of in the Indian Kashmir. They're saying human rights violations, they're saying threats, intimidation, arrests, enforced disappearances.
Human rights violations shouldn't be happening on either side of the border. But to equate the two is pretty preposterous.
Okay, so let me ask you the last, because we're completely out of time. Let me just ask you then, in conclusion, because like I said, you are the next generation. And if the next generation doesn't break from the script of the past, you'll be stuck in these cycles of enmity forever, both countries. So is there any one concession, one good faith gesture that you can offer to India? For example, India has been saying to Pakistan for years, if you can extradite UN designated terrorists who live in Pakistan, who've carried out strikes on Indian soil, why not start by saying we'll extradite two, let's say Masood Azhar and Hafiz Saeed? Or if you say you don't know where Masood Azhar is, Hafiz Saeed, as a good faith gesture.
I think that one...
But is there such a gesture?
Extremely valid point you're making is about the next generation. The fact is, generation after generation, India and Pakistan have been trapped in conflict, historically over Kashmir, more recently over terrorism. As far as these confidence building measures as part of a comprehensive dialogue with Pakistan, where terrorism is one of the issues that were discussed. I'm sure Pakistan would not be opposed to any of these things. At the moment, the frustration, so the cases that we've been successful in prosecuting against these individuals are cases that we've brought as vis-a-vis terrorist financing, etc. The cases that we're having difficulty in prosecuting these individuals are the ones that are of interest to India, and there's a reason for that. It's because India is refusing to comply with certain basic elements that require those convictions to take place. For example, it's important for you, if you want a conviction out of these courts, to present the evidence within these courts for people to come over from India to testify, to put up with whatever the counter accusations will be. If India is willing to be cooperative in that process, I'm sure there will be no hurdle in extraditing any individual of concern. And the day that someone like Masood Azhar or these individuals are in our custody, I believe they're in Afghanistan. There's a whole host, there's complexities there. The world's in a grey rather than a black and white.
You've opened up a whole new line about India's lack of cooperation, and there's a whole argument to how Pakistan has actually conducted those investigations, how those investigations have collapsed and the accused are free. But I don't want to go there.
I want to... You say they're free. I could deke Pakistan mein.
No, I'm saying that some of those accused in the 2008 Mumbai attacks,
I am honest to my
are actually, according to the US State Department, under the protection of the government of Pakistan.
Anything, like especially that Hafiz Saeed comment, is particularly concerning, because if that's your understanding of the ground realities, that's not what's happening on the ground. You can't allow us to leave the fate of the people of India and the people of Pakistan to whether it is Hafiz Saeed or anybody else. And if we have to seize this opportunity in the crisis to have a conversation, to at least try. We owe it to the future generation of Pakistanis in India. I am from a younger generation. I'm not locked in the same way that I believe it's a lot easier for people from other generations to talk about war. because the consequences of that war will be paid for in the blood, sweat and tears of the younger generation of India and Pakistan.
All right. Let's leave it there. We're completely out of time, Mr. Bhutto. But thank you very much indeed for talking to me.
Thank you so much.